Everyone, and welcome back to another MBA Student Association virtual engagement. My name is Drew Glover, the MBASA incoming president. Today, we're going to get to know one of our faculty members better. Our Director of Media, Madeline Clark, is going to introduce our guest and kick us off. Maddie, take it away.
Hi, I'm Maddie. I am the current Director of Media and then soon to be Director of Media and Marketing. Today we are joined by Dr. Riley, and if Dr. Riley wants to go ahead and introduce himself and give us a little background on him, that would be great.
Thank you, Maddie. My name is Dr. Jason Riley. I'm an associate professor of supply chain management. I've been teaching at Sam Houston now for about 8.5 years. Let's see, before coming here, I was at Clemson University where I got my PhD, specifically focused in supply chain management and supply chain risk. Now, going back a little bit further, I have about 12 years of industry experience. So I worked at Apple Computer for a couple of years and then went to Lowe's Home Improvement and ultimately ended up at Lowe's there before going to get my PhD. So I have a degree. My undergraduate was actually political science a long time ago from Iowa State, and I got my first dose of MBA / supply chain management at Michigan State back in about 2000. So been in industry in the supply chain industry for a long time now, with or without trying. So about 12 years in industry at 5 different Fortune 500 companies, and then teaching between here and Clemson about 12 years also.
Wow. So you have a very stacked resume, basically. So
yeah, I fell into a lot of positions that got me into supply chain management. So before we all knew what that was.
Mm-hmm. So we're in the presence of an expert here, and thank you so much for joining us today to give us all this insight. Basically how it's going to go is we have a handful of questions and it's going to be just broken up into a handful of different categories. So to start out, we're going to just go kind of more into your background. And with the first question, it is, how did you land your job with Apple?
So actually was at Michigan State University getting my MBA, and I actually had a dual major there. It was supply chain management and business information systems. You might call that data analytics or data analytics now, but at the time we didn't know where to call it. We just went through the normal recruiting process and interviewed. It was the height of the tech boom in 1999, 2000. So Apple came just like a lot of other companies. I was really focused, even though I was in Michigan, I was not focused on the automotive industry like a lot of my colleagues were, but I focused primarily on information systems companies. So HP, Intel, Compaq, and that's because I had done that before. So I thought that was a logical extension. And Apple came and invited me out to California. I got to go out there for a great interview. There was actually about 40 MBAs they brought in all at the same time, and they ended up hiring about 23 of us. And it was 14 from Michigan State, a whole bunch from Penn State, and like 2 or 3 from Arizona State. So being that supply chain is a pretty small world, it was great to walk into Apple and know a lot of people right off the bat.
Yeah, and it sounds like a great opportunity for anyone kind of wanting to get their MBA and everything too. Yeah. So for another question, we do want to know, what is your proudest moment with Apple, since it sounds like it was an eventful time?
The different launches. So I was on the iMac computer line. So the iMac, if you know, back in the day, had different colors. So, I mean, the standard colors were Bondi blue, grape, ruby, tangerine, and I'm missing one. I think it's snow. And then we introduced quite a few just different colors. So at one point we updated one called graphite. Then we got into some tie-dye ones. So Blue Dalmatian, Flower Power, and then some other ones that were fun. But those were great launches. It was just because they worked out, they were successful. The other one I would throw in too is that we started a plant up in the Czech Republic, not run by us, but getting that up and running. So 2 of those pretty good moments during that time.
Yeah, I know for myself personally, I don't know about the other officers or other like MBA, students and everything, those laptops or the computers that were colorful, I've always secretly still wanted one of those. I know they're not really around anymore, but those are the ones I'd always wish I could have had. But so what about for any challenges you had faced while you were at Apple?
The biggest challenge that I would say that I constantly talk about, just because it was omnipresent, was the communication. So, I mean, put it this way: when I had a plant in Mexicali, Mexico. But it was run by Koreans. So the LG company, the company LG, Lucky Gold Star, ran the plant. So the management was actually Korean. The workers were obviously from Mexico. I had a materials manager that was Australian and a purchasing manager that was, or logistics manager that was Indian. So getting on the calls with them every couple of days was a big interpretation fest. We had to really, really get the communication, really work on those communication factors, which I think is, a lot of people go into business think that most companies are great at communicating. You find out that they're not. And then when you throw in a bunch of different languages / dialects, it can be particularly difficult.
That is completely understandable. I think we've all probably been in situations similar to that in some way or another. So, and then with your time at Apple, how has that led to working in supply chain at Lowe's?
Well, actually, between Apple and I was also at Owens Corning. So
Okay.
basically, yeah, I mean, I don't mention Owens Corning because it was a pretty short tenure, but basically, I left Apple mainly because 9/11 occurred. I had a brand new child. My wife was at a .com, and we just didn't like the environment at the time. So having been at Apple for a couple of years, we looked around, and Owens Corning was actually one of the companies that had recruited me beforehand. Owens Corning is the Pink Panther insulation or roofing. A lot of people are familiar with that, but they actually moved me to Napa, California for a while. And so I lived in Napa for 1 year, and then they moved me back to sunny Toledo, Ohio, which was not the greatest place. So I went there. But the one thing, Owens Corning, the reason they moved me back was because they were going bankrupt. They had been sued for the asbestos litigation for like $40 billion. So I spent about a year and a half there, and that's why I moved on to Lowe's, just because it was it was a much better fit, and it was a company that was growing rather than shrinking. So did it prepare me? I mean, the systems were different, the people were different, but I mean, the supply chain concepts were pretty new. Lowe's did not have the supply chain expertise, and they brought in like 30 of us all simultaneously to kind of redo operations and supply chain.
Okay. Yeah. So you're basically also answering a little bit of my next question, but if you want to elaborate a little bit more on just any other differences you've seen working on in the technology industry versus more like the retail industry side of things, that would be great.
The biggest difference, I mean, so, I'd say the difference between Apple and Lowe's is the number of SKUs, the stock keeping units, or the number of items that you have in the store. So Apple obviously doesn't have a lot of, handful of computers. They have headphones, they have, accessories that go with the phones, but I mean, they're talking, they top out at a couple hundred parts, and most manufacturers do like that. Owens Corning would have been the same boat. Lowe's, the biggest difference was the sheer number of SKUs. If you kind of take the fact that we had about 15 to 1,800 stores while I was there, plus, each store can have between 10 to 20,000 part numbers, trying to deal with forecasts or purchases became particularly hard just because of the sheer number. And so you had to switch over from like just tactically attacking things to really working on your computer to make sure that the system settings were right for a very large volume of items.
Okay, good to know. And then basically, we also would like to know your fondest memories from Lowe's, and I'm just blanked on it, but the Owens
Corning, yeah. Owens
Did
Corning.
I say that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, your fondest memories from those as well. Yeah.
I just, again, I think the successful launches of products. I mean, that was kind of getting stores up and running, getting new products launched. So I did a lot of project work because of my expertise in both supply chain and information systems. So it was kind of like, well, we need to launch a product. So we approached them from a project management perspective in both or in all three of those companies. So, you know, if we're launching a new store, if we're launching a new product, a Super Friday item, most of our teams did it as a project, and those were very, very successful, and I enjoyed those immensely. Probably the biggest one I did that I was involved with was at one point we opened 13 stores simultaneously in Canada.
Oh my goodness.
So I actually went up there for about 2 weeks to work to try to get and again, my expertise was supply chain systems. So I was trying to get all the procurement settings and logistics settings set correctly. But yeah, they came up, relatively few problems once they were up and running. From my end of things, there were other problems, but that was probably one of my prouder moments.
Okay. Thank you so much for all that background. Now we're going to just kind of switch gears a little bit to the academia side of things. So what motivated you to pursue your PhD? I'm so sorry, and transition to the more academic kind of side of things.
So after working in this industry for about 12 years, I was ready for something new. And so I had met with my wife one afternoon and kind of proposed a brewery, believe it or not, microbrewery. And I was thinking about that. And it was the microbrewery I figured out really wasn't about the beer production. It was about the distribution, again, leaning on my supply chain. And so I think my wife was a little hesitant about that and was like, do we really like beer that much? And so I had always been talking about my PhD. And so it was one of those things. We laid out a few goals if we did. And by that time we had 2 children. And so we were like, okay, you know, I would like to get done in 4 years, and I'd like to get some, you know, some very specific things out of it. So we laid out a plan, again, just like a little project, and applied to 5 schools, got into 3, and ended up selecting Clemson just because we wanted to stay in that area of the country. So it was something that I had been thinking about for a while. When I was at Michigan State, that one of the professors there, she had even prompted me about possibly staying for my PhD. But I'm glad I got the industry experience. I think it really adds to my depth of for both my research and teaching purposes. So I'm glad I have them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then how has your time outside of academia influenced your journey as a faculty member?
Oh, I love the fact that I have the experience and that I, you know, continue to keep contacts with the people in industry. I try to update all my stuff, but I like and especially from the business perspective, I like how they work together. So I can help a lot of businesses out. They help me out with data or information so I can do my research. But yeah, I'm always working with companies, working with this last summer I went to Colombia, South America, to do a project there for 5 weeks. So that was really fun. Just so keeping my hands in the pot is really a valuable experience.
Yeah. And then have you fully left the industry for academia yet?
And no, I continue to delve into that. I've added, you know, consulting in a few places, and like I said, the Columbia experience was more of a consulting role, but I continue to keep my hands in that pot. But no, I would never go back. A couple things I didn't like that I don't want to get back into and the academic world gives me a lot of freedom for the things I want to do.
Oh, well, that's always nice to have a little bit of freedom with all of that.
Yes.
Is there anything you're currently researching right now?
So yeah, the biggest thing right now, I've got 3 products going on. One looking at how variety, the depth and breadth of variety affects sales in retail stores. So does it affect sales? Does it affect stockouts? Does it affect different things? So just as companies think about adding more products, more SKUs, and that's either new flavors, right? So instead of just 1 flavor product, they have 10 flavors now, or they have different sizes, so depth and breadth. But most consumers now, or there, I shouldn't say most, there's a large number of consumers that are variety seeking. So they're out there seeking more variety. So they're the ones out there wanting the different products. So we're doing research there. The other one is I'm just doing online transactions, how people view online transactions. And a lot of people have done it from the sales and, how do Yelp reviews affect that? But I'm doing it from an operations side. So I'm more worried about the logistics and distribution. So I really talk about that. And I call it the last mile distribution.
Yeah. So then how did you ultimately get interested in those topics that you chose for all the research?
Mainly my contacts from industry. As I talked with them, they said, hey, this is still something that we're struggling with. What do you think? And I would say the last 5 of my projects have all come from just contacts who actually, either own small businesses or work at Lowe's, work at Apple, something like that. So those are people just directly giving me insight. Then I go from there.
So what I'm hearing is networking and connections are important at all stages. For anyone that might watch this, it's important in your life and just job advancement and everything.
I will tell you, networking has saved my butt so many times. I mean, as I transitioned, like I said, I've been at 5 Fortune 500 companies, and every one of them I transitioned with friends and support. And I mean, I even put it this way: when I moved from Owens Corning to Lowe's, so I was in Toledo, moving to North Carolina, I actually met my new boss at the Toledo building the first time before I realized he was going to be my boss. I didn't intentionally do it, but he was there. But the contacts you guys will gain, network. It has opened so many doors for me, continues to open doors for me. And I try to reciprocate in a lot of cases. So network. That's if you want to learn one thing, make sure your LinkedIn file is up and running, and then make sure you call those people or text them once a year, just to follow up. So any of your classmates here, make sure you keep in contact with them, guys.
So much great advice just right there. So now we're just going to kind of move into the supply chain issues as well for all of some more questions for
What
you.
issues? There's no issues.
No, absolutely not. Everything is perfect right now.
Yes.
So, what are the biggest weaknesses in the U.S. supply chain that COVID has exposed, and how are these weaknesses affecting our future?
There's a cascading list of that right now, but it initially started with just shortages because people or companies closed and people didn't go to work or the numbers were down. That was the first wave. The second one, so that's where we're still seeing shortages in microchips. The other thing is, now that everybody has a little bit of cash in their pocket and they're starting to order more, buy more. And I also say that they're still shifting from going, buying from retail stores to doing it online. More and more people are using Amazon and all the other ones. The system, the infrastructure, and specifically the shipping logistics system. So it really is the boats, the ports, the trucks, everything. Nobody was ready for this surge. The numbers are way up. Now, here's the peculiar thing, is that we expect them to go back down, and this is a bubble right now because everybody has a little bit of money in their pocket, but it should go back down. So that's the problem, is the long-term investment. I don't think it's there. People are going to say, oh, we should just buy more cranes or buy more trucks. But the companies who have to do the net present value calculation or the actual calculations are going, volume is, it's a bubble for maybe 6 months, but 6 months from now, it's expected to be back to normal. And that's being tempered because, it'll go back down because 1, people will spend the money, 2, inflation is up. And there's just, once all the ports clear, and we'll have a lot of stuff, and then nobody's going to want the trucks anymore. So it's the investment.
Okay, good to know. And since supply chain issues can affect many aspects of businesses, like the customer support, retention, financials, how are companies pivoting during the ongoing supply chain disruption?
The biggest one I think we're going to continue to see, we've already seen a seismic shift, but for the last 30 years, companies have been moving offshore, meaning they've been moving to China, Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, wherever you want to go, but out of the United States. And it's actually probably about 35 years. Well, now that costs are up, it's economically no longer feasible to do what they had done. So we're going to see a bunch of people reshoring. And this is not an uncommon strategy. We saw this with call centers in the 90s and early 2000s. A lot of call centers, companies in the US tried to move them over to India or China. That didn't work out as well as we wanted. They reshored those in a lot of, not all situations, but a lot of situations. And now we're going to see manufacturing coming back. It may not come back directly to the US. It may not be here in Texas, but I mean, places like Iowa, Nebraska, or Mexico, or parts of Canada should see a surge of new manufacturing jobs or those lower cost production jobs.
Okay. And then from all your time with supply chain, what is the most important supply chain innovation that you've witnessed?
Supply chain innovation. The single biggest influence right now is information and predictive analytics.
Mm-hmm.
The fact is, the way I was going to phrase it is, we have data, or companies have data, but they don't know how to transform that into usable information. And the fact is that we now measure everything. Instead of, it used to be we just shipped the product that left China by the time it got here, but now we actually measure every step in that process. And if you can learn how to use predictive analytics to identify threats beforehand, identify disruptions while they're occurring, that's going to be the biggest innovation that I think will continue for the next 20 years.
Wow, that's good to know. And as we kind of wrap up, is there any pieces of advice you would give to your grad school self?
Learn as much as you can about where the data is. Whatever company you go into, I don't care if it's oil or healthcare or banking or whatever, those systems. So when they talk about ERP systems, the SAPs, the Oracles, the Teradatas, whatever they are, figure out where the data is. And you need, I wish I learned more about it, but for you guys, learn every single piece you can, because it's about the information. And how fast it's moving. And the one I always say, I had an oil guy come and present on one of my classes last year, and he pulls up a well out in West Texas, and it was this, beautiful graphics, and it kind of shows, and the drill bit was at, this angle at this temperature, and it was 10,000 feet deep, whatever it was. And he goes, this is all great data. This is all great. He goes, however, real-time data is no longer fast enough. Real-time data is no longer fast enough.
Wow.
So companies don't want to know that their rig is breaking down. The bank doesn't want to know that they've run out of money. They want to know it before it actually happens. So if you're going to learn anything, guys, get into data analytics, get into the information systems, learn the SAP, learn the Oracle, where the databases are. Because it's complicated. An SAP system would have 20, will average 20,000 databases, and they're all named something weird because the naming conventions are hard to come up with now with 20,000 databases. If you're going in the industry, regardless of the industry, you need to know where the data is so you can use that when you have to make a decision and turn it into usable information.
That's very helpful to know. And since we have one more question for you, and it is there anything else that you would want to talk about that we have not touched on quite yet? Or if you want to elaborate on anything else that maybe you forgot something earlier or anything like that?
No, I think that you've hit on the big topics. I mean, from a supply chain perspective and from my world, I mean, networking is huge. Information systems are huge. I think that you guys have you're getting out of your graduate program now is great. The good news is obviously the number of workers is down because people decided to leave the economy and have decided not to return, but just the general numbers are down, even if it wasn't for this economy. So I think, get out there, apply early. I know that I'm hearing about students who are already getting summer internships. now. I mean, we're in November, and I know several who are already getting them now. They're already posted. I actually sent out to my supply chain students the whole list of internship opportunities, and I mean, I probably had 30 on the list, and that was just here in Texas. So, you know, don't be afraid to put your name out there and to, you know, throw it out there. You never know what happened. My trip that I got to go to Columbia was a very long shot, but because I asked enough times, I think people finally got worn out, but they were like, okay, here, you got it. And so I got to go to Columbia for 5 weeks this summer.
Wow.
During COVID, during riots, during everything. But you know, don't hesitate to ask, guys.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Riley, for joining us and everything and all the insight, advice, everything like that. I am going to go ahead and pass it over back to Drew to kind of close us out.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the time and effort. So,
Dr. Riley, it was really great getting to hear from you. And thank you, Maddie. Good luck on finals, everyone. Be sure to follow us on social media at shsu.mba and look out for more engagement opportunities this upcoming spring. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. Thank you.